Hi everyone, my name is Stump, and I'm going to be doing Crash 2 any percent no game over abuse. Are we ready to go? Alright, I'm gonna do new game, skip this initial cutscene, and then time will start when I gain control, which I'll count down to. 3, 2, 1, go. Alright, so this is Crash 2 any percent no game over abuse. And what I'm going to be doing in this is collecting the 25 crystals and nothing else. There will be a boss after every 5, and then that gets me to the Cortex fight at the end, and that's the ordinary ending. The no game over abuse part is because there is something that that refers to if you were to game over in a level after getting one of the collectible items, such as the crystal, then you actually carry that into whatever level you enter after you respawn in the warp room after game overing, and that means you wouldn't be getting to the end of every level. So, and there's also a lot of intentional death in that, so that's a different thing and a different category. But throughout that level, and also through this one, you'll see the main movement technique here, which is the neutral slide spin, and that happens when I slide, let go of the directional buttons, and then spin at the end of the slide, and that keeps the speed from the slide through the spin, but also lets the slide cooldown timer run out so that I can continuously move at sliding speed. And one of the nice things about that also is that you're continuously attacking, so you generally don't need to worry too much about boxes or enemies in front of you. I'm also skipping mask boxes that would give me a third mask, even though that does give you invincibility. That interferes with your movement, and neutral slide spinning in that form is slower than when you're not in third mask form. It actually turns out that the fastest way to move along ground in that form is crawling. This is Hang 8. In this one, there are sections where we will be riding this board around through these river sections. And this is simply boosting through and avoiding the mines. And then off to the side here is that crystal. And that checkpoint's out of the way. And we boost through this final river section. And that's Hang 8. Now that gem there is because of that timer not having expired yet. That's what that extra gem in the level is for. And I actually go around it because there would be another animation in the warp room of Crash throwing that gem up into the air and watching it float into its spot above the warp gate. And then these birds, I am going to be jumping over and then spinning behind them. And that allows me to get knocked forward a little bit. Again, skipping the third mask form. another bird boost. We go down the left path here because that's where the crystal is. And this part with 2 birds in a row. You get left in a spot by the first bird boost that makes it a little hard to get the second one. And by rapidly zigzagging in the air, I can stretch the jump a little bit to get across those pits. Then Crash Dash is a little bit different. I'll be going towards the camera, and there will also be boulders rolling after me. So this is all about knowing where the pits are so you can avoid them. And by neutral slide spinning through those little buildings between the boulder sections, I avoid an animation happening where Crash, I need that, where Crash like tumbles forward as though barely having escaped from the boulder, and yeah, that wastes a little bit of time if that happens. But with neutral slide spinning, we end up way ahead of those boulders. But that's 5 crystals, so that means it's time for a boss.
Do we have a quick moment for donations?
Yeah, this entire fight is a good place for them.
All right, so we've got a couple from Magius1. We've got $5 for going towards the Castlevania Aria of Sorrow rando. This comment is SpeedGaming Live 2020 hype. The Battle of Metroidvania's hardest to learn versus accessible for all. We have $11.50 from Magius1, and we have 2 $5 donations from Magius1. Final Fantasy IV Free Enterprise, another excellent choice for next year's possible side tournaments. Final Fantasy 1 rando versus Final Fantasy IV Free Enterprise hype. And then $5 for the Super Mario Odyssey. Triple Bingo could be fun to watch and easy enough for people to learn for next year. Also, by the way, I am Metroid Master. I will be hosting for you for the next few hours.
That was the Ripperoo fight. And that fight is effectively an auto-scroller. Ripperoo does exactly the same patterns every single time. But that gets us to the second warp room, where there's another set of 5 levels. And then there will be another boss. So here we have Snowbiz, another snow level. And small enough pits like that you can slide across without falling in. And then these porcupines. As you get close to them, they extend their spikes and then move around, and touching them after their spikes are fully extended will hurt you. But when you neutral slide spin, you get to them before the spikes are fully extended, so that still counts as hitting them rather than them hitting you.
If we have a moment, I have another donation I can read off.
Sure.
All right, we have $20 from Marty7449 with no comment. Thank you very much.
Thanks. This is Air Crash. This is another river level. This one starts to have the platforms and the platforming sections move. And there are some that go up and drop down on a cycle. And we use our mask to go through those because they weren't out of the way. And then we have a different type of level next. In Barrett, as well as Bear Down in the next working, we ride on a baby polar bear who continuously moves forward. And all you can do is move side to side, do a boost and jump. And there are some tricky box arrangements in this level, although we don't worry about them in this category. But that's because due to the bear continuously moving forward, if you miss a box, you can't go back for it. You have to death warp. A little bit short on that. One of the things about the bear levels is that even though death tends to cost a little bit more time than it often does in other levels, there are nice death animations. Also, for some of the level end warps, but not others, you can slide against the space next to the that front little gear tooth looking thing, and you will get pushed up onto the warp pad and warped out. That doesn't work in all of the levels though. One of the things added to this compared to the previous boulder level is those electric barriers with a space underneath them. But there is enough space that even if you're on the spinning part of the neutral slide spin, you still get under them safely. There are also those little boost pads there. There are going to be a lot of those in this final section. Where between those and neutral slide spinning all the rest of the way, we get so far ahead of the boulder that you can't even see it anymore.
Looks like we have another $10 donation by Kip. Says this donation is for Super Metroid Randomizer and to shout out Stump for being a rad dude. It's crash time.
Thanks. This is the real deal, a new type of level, taking place in a sewer, where there are occasional pits with an electrification cycle. And we have the crystal down this left path. If I had 2 masks, I would have landed on the nitro there, because even though I would take a hit from that, that has a shorter animation than landing in the electrified water would be. And that's why I kept that other mask. So now we have another boss fight. This will be the Komodo brothers. Where one will send the other bouncing around the room. He stops, I spin him into the other one, and then knives are thrown. And for the later phases, my position begins to affect the bouncing more. So by doing that, I stretched out the movement of between the second last bounce and the last one, so that enough time would go by that he would stop. But that's the Komodo brothers fight. Warp rooms finished, 3 left. The plant food is another river level. This one has a lot more of those piranha-like plants. Where I'll actually be keeping a mask to the end to damage abuse through the final pair of them. Otherwise, I don't really have a way to avoid them. I would otherwise have to use a side path to go forward and kill them, and then come back and get on the board here. This one, keeping a mask for this saves me from having to go up to there and then back. So that's a good amount of time. And this similarly has a timer jump that we avoid to not waste time in the warp room. Oh, I got the snipe there. So those enemies with the blowtorches, they hit a fairly wide area when they have the torch down. So if I don't want to spend a mask, I've got to wait. But I was able to snipe the first one with one of the preceding enemies. If you're in exactly the right position, you can jump through those fast-moving fans without getting hit by them. I was a little bit short of that, so I'm going to have to wait for one of the blowtorch enemies here. But I'll still use my remaining mask against the other one. Then bear down is another bear level. This one has some slightly more involved obstacle arrangements than Barrett.
Do we have time for one quick donation?
Sure.
All right, we've got $20 from Iceman F1 with no comment.
Thanks. I guess I was a little bit close to the end of the explosion hitbox from that TNT. Bear levels truly do have the best death animations. And that set of platforms there leads to an entrance to the secret warp room. Not something that matters for this category, but that appears to be intended to be the way that a casual player would discover that. This is Road to Ruin. This level and Ruination in the next warp room. These are a lot more about smaller platforms with a lot of jumping between them. To finish this warp room out, we have Unbearable, which is a something sort of in between a boulder level and a bear level.
It's quite the angry bear.
Very much. Now, the electric gates in this are a little bit lower than the ones in the previous boulder level. So, if I'm on the spinning part of the neutral slide spin, I will still get hit by them. So I have to watch what part of the movement cycle I'm on. There are a lot more of those in this section. that was... Those were places where I had to be sure that I was on the slide part, so that's why I stopped and then slid to get under them. And then we have this final section. This is what truly makes this something between a bear level and a boulder level.
Hopefully the bear was okay.
I hope so too. So this boss fight is tiny. And this is probably the place where there's the largest impact of RNG. At some point, 3 of these platforms are going to drop. And hopefully Tiny will be going onto one of them. And then after Tiny falls, all but 3 of the remaining platforms drop. And then repeat twice, except this time only 2 platforms will drop. I'm standing here so that if the single platform that drops is one of the corners, I can get Tiny to jump over it. Because when only a corner drops, if you don't have Tiny very close to it, you can't really get him over it. And you've got to hope that a better platform drops. So that gets us to Warp Room 4, which we're going to do out of order. Because there is an exception to third mass form being slower, and that is when you're on those hanging grids like you saw at the end of the eel deal. You actually move much faster across those when you're in third mass form than when you're not. And there's a long section of that in level 16, hanging out. And there's a mask box before it, but no other mask boxes, so to take advantage of that, we have to bring 2 masks into that level. So I'm doing this level first to try and keep these 2 masks out of it. And now we have bees. And those electric barriers, you can actually get over them with a glitch high jump. I've been doing a good number of those throughout this, but haven't really talked about those yet. But if you do a slide jump and you spin immediately after you leave the ground, you go a little bit higher. If you spin at the same moment you leave the ground, you go a little bit lower. And sometimes the specific movement that you get from that can be useful. For example, for getting onto those ending warps. But we have 2 masks, so we're gonna do hanging out. There's a little bit of this before we get to the mask box, so you can see that Crash isn't exactly moving that fast across these. I got a little bit hung up on that corner, so I'm going to wait there so that you can see this. So now I have third mask for him. And this is why we do it. Not just the faster movement across this, but also not having to wait for those metal spikes to move aside. That's hanging out. Then we got another ruin level here. The glitch high jump will... Yeah, we had extra masks. But glitch high jump will get you across the fire from those statues. Then you have these rotating platforms to deal with. And we do not want that mask. Also, the bouncing logs that are thrown by that final enemy there, you can actually spin those away. I went so long not knowing that when I was playing this as a kid, and always had so much trouble with all of the gem paths and the ruin levels that had those enemies. This is Cold Hard Crash. And in this level, we'll actually be using the... Well, now that I have that death, we won't be using the death route. But I was going to use the death route there because it bypasses part of the... it bypasses a section of the main level that is slower than the death route. However, both that section and the death route have boxes. And that makes this level a real pain to get the box gem in casually. Thankfully, there's a box duplication glitch that you can use to greatly ease the process of getting that box gem in 100%. That's what masks are for. This is where we would end up from the death route. It's not that often that I have to do that section of the level, so I had to do that a little bit more carefully than usual. There we are. And finally for this warp room we have behaving. Sort of like the first level we did here, except that the beehives are larger and spawn more bees, and the bees move faster and are angrier. They provide a lot more of the dark colored ground here that you can burrow under. That happens if you spin while not moving. There's a glitch high jump to get across that electric gate. Well, I wasn't expecting to be able to jump out of that. But with the added speed of the bees, you can't outrun the bees casually, but neutral slide spinning does let you. So I never need to use the diggable ground here. Actually, if I were to dig down into it, that would actually waste a good amount of time because of there's a fairly long animation for Crash to get in and out of it. And since we can't bring a mask into this boss fight, which is Engine, I spent it to bounce across those nitros at the end so I wouldn't have to go underground there. Alright, I think I need 2 more hits on the right one and 1 more on the left. Yep. So this is Engine. And in that first phase I had to get 10 hits on each of those hands. Now let's see about double shoulders. Alright, 2 and 4. 3 and 4. Oh no, no double shoulders. So you want to destroy both hands and both shoulders at the same time, because if you don't, then the remaining one gets a couple of extra hit points. But that's Engine. And if Engine appeared to be moving a bit slower there than you're used to, that's because I'm actually using the PAL version of the game. Because of some differences in how parts of the movement work, slightly faster movement, slightly higher jumps, and also a PAL exclusive trick that is going to be in the level after this one, as well as the other jetpack level. But one of the effects of that is that some of the bosses have their movement slowed down. But in cases like Engine, that works out well for me, because you get it's easier to land the necessary hits. And then you have these wonderful screams from those enemies with the shields.
He just seems so happy to be there.
So this level is our first jetpack level. And sometimes that can happen when you enter this level with 2 masks. But I'm just gonna push forward here. Spinning does slow you down a little tiny bit. If I had any masks, I would skip that checkpoint. But we can also push forward straight through those and through that plasma field after them that doesn't actually exist because you're not supposed to be able to get past the enemy. But that is a PAL exclusive trick. One of many reasons why that's the version of the game that we use for this. And Night Fight is sort of like the other jungle levels, except that it's dark. So I need to get these fireflies to light the way. And the amount of time that they last before they fly away is set such that if you continuously moved forward without doing any special tricks, each one would expire just as you got to the next one. So the amount of time that I have 2 fireflies is a great way to visualize how much time neutral slide spinning is saving. Now we've got another jetpack level. Those floating wires move essentially randomly, so sometimes they can be in a position that's a bit of an unpleasant surprise. PAL for the win. And when I get to the landing platform there, I try to be right on it rather than being above it so that I don't have to wait for Crash to drop down onto it. And then Spaced Out will be the final level. This is another piston one, similar to piston it away. And those platforms, the sides of them are actually harmful. So you gotta watch out around them. And now we have this little section behind some glass. We don't have to deal with what's behind it. We can bounce off that shield enemy and get on top of the glass. I wasn't on the cycle I thought I was, so normally there would be space there. That my iframes caused that to remain low, which I wasn't expecting. Also, those shrink ray particles can be spun. But that's 25 crystals. So it is time for the final boss fight against Cortex, which is probably one of the most anticlimactic fights in the Crash series. It's a jetpack level. I chase Cortex. When I get close enough, I spin. 3 hits and he's dead. Time will be on the 3rd hit. There's 2. Get ready. And time. Well, that is Crash 2, any percent, no game over reviews.
What do you suppose happened to
Thanks to
Cortex?
SpeedGaming for
And what
having me
about
do
the
this.
Cortex vortex?
My name's
It's
Stump.
still
You
up
can
there.
find my channel at stump.tv. And good luck to the remaining runners.